So welcome to Business Spotlight series. I'm Paul McCarthy, and today I'm joined from Pete. Oh, I've cocked it up already. Unbelievable. This is the worst bit for me. I did this the other day. Let's try again.
Okay.
Join from. Okay, right. Welcome to Business Spotlight series. I'm Paul McCarthy, and today I'm joined by Pete Newson from Parasure. Pete, it's great to have you with us today. Can you start off by giving us a good feel about your business, please?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It's very nice to be invited onto this program. Parasure is a business that was established 12 years ago by myself and my business partner, Cindy Graham. We've been in infection control jointly for about 25 years each. That gives away my age, I know, but we've been in the business a long, long time. Predominantly around the effective cleaning, sterilization, and disinfection of hospital instruments, reusable hospital instruments. But at the beginning of COVID, we, with the infection control background, had a look around in terms of the development of organic solutions into your disinfection, into your cleaning, and obviously into the hand hygiene arena. And that's predominantly what I'd like to focus on in this discussion, is around the Parasure Organics range and what we've done that's a bit unique there, the opportunities that we see both locally and globally, and generally the trend with the emphasis being on environmentally friendly solutions. With the cultural diversity that we have here in the UK, we think it's a really good fit.
Okay. And is there a particular market, whether it be geographic, whether it be a market sector or type size of business? What's your ideal sort of?
It branches all aspects. Obviously, with regards to cleaning and disinfection, you are involved primarily. Our focus is the healthcare environment, both primary and secondary. But there are applications, a number of applications in the veterinary market, for example, in hospitality, in transport, and various different other organizations like that. So, for example, your education scenarios, we have a wide form of application based on the technology that we are using.
Okay, great. And you said about your background with your business partner. Why did you decide to go into this business to bring? Well,
historically, infection control is an arena, as I say, that we've both been involved in 25 years independently. The hospital-acquired infection rates internationally are something that are scary in reality. If you look at the United States, for example, just in sort of normal speak, so to speak, there are more people who die of hospital-acquired infections in the US than all murders and road accidents combined. And that is a factor that is contributed towards the effective cleaning of reusable instruments. It's not the only factor, but it is a significant factor. So we've spent the last 25 years basically going around the world teaching people how to reprocess instruments correctly, because of the impact that has not necessarily on the facility itself, although obviously there's significant benefits there, but on patients. If we can reduce the number of hospital-acquired infections by 2 in a hospital, we've done a good job, really.
So you're just saving lives, basically, is what you.
Well, but it's succinctly, our objective is to help save lives. I think. Yeah. I wouldn't classify myself as a lifesaver, but
right, yeah,
trying to help in that environment. Yes.
Okay. And what's your secret sauce? What is it that Parasure does really, really well that maybe your competitors don't?
Okay. Around Parasure Organics, the secret sauce is a natural lactic acid, which is basically orange pips and pith oil. And you've got to be careful how you say that. It comes out wrong all the time. But historically, it's been something that has been used all the way back in the Egyptian times as a disinfection solution. The main advantages of it are the fact that it is 100% organic, and that applies to both the disinfectants and the cleaning solutions. And therefore, you are not having any of the carcinogenic properties or alcohol-based solutions that you have in the market today. If you look at the global market, particularly during the COVID scenario, anybody using an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, for example, would have had, on a regular basis, would have had significant skin problems within a relatively short space of time. I say significant, obviously that varies from person to person, but it is something that we have tried to resolve by having the same efficacy, be it biocidal, virucidal, or sporicidal, but without using the alcohol-based solutions or the peracetic acid-based solution.
So a bit of a perception that might be out there is that these more sort of organic products are not as effective as the sort of artificial, the more sort of chemically based. What would be your answer to that?
It's very true. The answer is alcohol-based solutions, particularly let's talk about hand sanitizers. There is a global perception, both in the USA, it's a 70% level of alcohol, percentage of alcohol that you're meant to have in hand sanitizers. And in the European context, it's 63%. And the WHO recommendations are based around those particular percentages. Alcohol is the mainstay, so to speak, because it's so simple to make and so cheap to make.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's no doubt about the fact that it kills the bugs on your hand. The problem with alcohol-based solutions is that it kills only when it's wet. As soon as it dries on your hand, there is no efficacy at all. And obviously, the drying of alcohol on your hands dries the skin, et cetera, which I mentioned earlier on. And all international standards recommendations, although you can have the same biocidal claims, you can have the same virucidal, sporicidal claims between your alcohol solutions and your non-alcohol solutions, there's been not a huge uptake from the CDC in the US or from the WHO in terms of the application. And the reason why is because it's very difficult to test. Because your natural solutions, some of them have silver in them rather than a lactic acid based. Lactic acid based is a relatively difficult component to stabilize. So a lot of these organizations don't actually have the capability to test efficacy. So the only way we can do that is through the international standard. And as I say, alcohol is cheap. Ethanol which is the foundation of that, is cheap. So your organic solutions tend to be slightly more expensive, but in the organic solutions such as ours, you've got a 4-hour residual efficacy. So if you think of a hospital, of a nurse working in an 8-hour shift, she would have to apply it twice, whereas the current recommendations are that you have to apply it between every patient. So there's a whole educational switch that has to be done.
Got you.
In the wider market, if you're looking at using it at home, if you're looking at using it in a hospitality environment, there is a far faster uptake in that sort of market segment because of the benefits that come with it.
Got you. Okay. So it's just as effective, but a bit more pricier, but also has benefits past that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. And let's talk about people. So has there been any particular person over your career or since you started Parasure that's inspired you?
Yeah, there is. There's a guy called Chris Cripps who unfortunately no longer is with us, but he brought me over basically to be, in a nutshell, brought me over from South Africa in 1998 to join his international team in infection control in the development. To be honest with you, at the time, I was kind of using it as a stepping stone to get over to the UK, as many of us did from there at the time. But the passion that the man had for what he did and his ability to communicate on all levels to all cultures all over the world was something that was absolutely inspiring and got me absolutely hooked into the industry as a whole. And I'd far rather be doing what I'm doing today than to be selling any form of other solutions that might be out there. I do think what we do makes a difference. And I do think that the education side of it is bringing on your emerging developing markets, secondary, tertiary level markets at a far more effective rate than just trying to sell them a product. So he is again, an inspirational man, no longer with us, but he certainly got me to where I am today.
Fantastic. And what's been your biggest learning since you've been running your own business?
Biggest learning is managing the various aspects of the business. And I say the biggest learning, my background is business development, so ultimately sales from an educational perspective, getting the head around production, getting the head around ensuring your right stock levels are where they need to be, when they need to be. So the operational side of it, from my perspective, has been the biggest learning curve. My business partner takes care of all the HR side of it and all that sort of side of it. But the operational side is the one that I've learned most from. And I think, we have gone through the complications of Brexit and things like that at the same time. And there again, that's been a learning curve and a half in terms of we import quite a lot of stuff internationally and from Europe, and we export from here to 15 different countries at the moment. So the paperwork required around that is fairly extensive.
Okay, so that's quite interesting. So it's more about the breadth of things that you need to know about rather than being an absolute specialist. Yeah. I think
and you do have to become more of a jack of all trades, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got your strengths. Everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses, but managing your own business or relatively small business, you have to adapt to the circumstances that surround you. So if that means going into the warehouse and working on production or distribution or whatever the case might be, that's what you do, obviously. But a great learning curve as well. I mean, it's exciting to get up every day and do it for yourself. It really is.
Yeah, brilliant. And it sounds like a lot of learning as well along the way.
Yeah. I mean, I've fallen asleep with some of the most boring books you can imagine, trying to learn how to organize my operational side of it. But yeah, I think I've picked up quite a lot along the way.
Brilliant. And you've talked you talked early on about COVID. You also just mentioned Brexit. So what have you had to do within your business during these challenges? And now there's the economy and things like that. Have you had to make any significant changes to your business during the last years?
Most definitely. I mean, the organics range was basically born during the COVID period. Found a mad scientist in Froome who makes all the juice for us. But at the time, 90% of our business income was reliant on the consulting that we were doing. So we weren't really trading in anything physical at all. It was experience and our capability internationally. With that consultancy side pretty much dying overnight with COVID, we had to then branch into areas that we felt were going to, in the long term, generate revenue. It wasn't just about COVID. It was about establishing something that was topical at the time and is still topical today, and then using that and our international experience to develop that product line, so to speak, to have something tangible rather than consultancy, which, as far as we're concerned, is slightly intangible.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. So basically, the business completely changed because of COVID. Yeah. It's completely changed, unrecognizable from what it was beforehand. By the sounds.
Yeah. Hence, as I say, a huge learning curve.
Yeah. And I presume it's more scalable than being a consultancy as well for you.
Well, exactly. I mean, we do have consultancy consult for us on particular projects. We've just finished one actually with the WHO in the Middle East, which is very successful. But you're right. It's you can't scale yourself. You can't duplicate yourself all over the place. And the other side of that is if, and I am getting slightly older, when you get to a stage of developing an exit strategy, for want of a better way of putting it, consultancy is a very difficult business to exit from because it's about you as the individuals, really.
Okay. And what do you think are going to be the challenges for Parasure over the next 5 years, or within your industry?
I can tell you, number one, scaling, and meeting the rise in demand, not only for the organics range, but we're educating in India, in Egypt, in the Middle East at the moment, from a reprocessing of hospital instrument side of it. It's scalability. That's our biggest challenge going forward. We can maintain where we are today pretty easily, but that's obviously not the objective here.
So it's keeping up with demand. So the demand.
Yeah, it's also having 15 different arms so that you can actually cope with the different aspects. Each one of these projects or each one of these markets is a project in itself, a business in itself, particularly with the idea of semi or fully locally manufacturing over there. And that takes time and a lot of it. So when I talk about scaling up, it's not necessarily just production and warehousing and the logistical side of it. It's also from an FTE perspective, from a manpower perspective, and finding the expertise that fits into the niche, so to speak.
Got you. And what are your aspirations for the business over the next 5 years?
Well, the next 5 years is to get the projects that we are signing off on at the moment, particularly in India and Egypt, to get those up and running. I think there's a lot of political and governmental support in putting those projects into place and going forward. But at the same time, because of the arena we're operating in, i.e. infection control, it actually also makes a difference locally. And if you take a market like India at the moment, it's a generalization. There's a huge amount of capital that is spent on antibiotics or treatment in terms of infection, whereas you can spend probably 1/10 of that if you're doing the process correctly in the first place and avoiding the infection. So that's really part of the goal. The goal is to leave a stamp. As I say, we've worked with the WHO, but to have been involved in a business that actually, although it's a commercial entity, make no mistake, we're not an NGO or anything like that, but actually does also make a difference in the local context as well as the international context.
Fantastic. We've looked into the future a bit there. Let's go back a bit. So if you could start it all again, what would you do differently?
I probably would have looked for more involvement, a wider spectrum in terms of the board and a greater reach in terms of investments, because we basically started it ourselves with what we have or had at the time. And I think that it's the growth, a cash flow perspective is something that every company that's growing faces at some stage or not.
Yeah.
And I think that if we had, obviously we didn't see COVID coming, but if we had projected forward the conversion of the business from purely consulting into this manufacturing and trading organization, we should have at that stage researched better the opportunities that are out there for third-party investment or venture capital, I think is the right way to term it. And that's proving more difficult because the business is relatively old already.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of getting that momentum and interest. So there you go. That's what I would do differently. That's
interesting, isn't it? That it's harder to get investment for a more established business than it is for a newer business or sort of idea as such.
Yeah, it is. There is a what's a juxtaposition there, because you see you see it pretty much daily in the media. You know, these organizations that have come up with an idea, and you'll have a fair amount of, obviously it's got to be a reasonable idea, but you have a fair amount of venture capital that's around to throw at these projects. And I think it is difficult. If you have a trading history, if you have a history like ours, you have the benefit of having 12 years track record. But at the same time, there's the concern that it's 12 years old and therefore, you know, is it going anywhere at all? I guess is the answer to that one.
Yeah. And what would you tell your 18-year-old self? What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
I'm not sure that there's that much that I'll do differently. I at 18 years old, I was in South Africa leading a completely different life. I don't know that there's anything I'd do differently. I've had the privilege of working and setting up businesses in Dubai. I've had privilege of working in Europe. I've been all over this country. So my kids would tell you that they've had an international upbringing. And I think, you know, with the global village that we live in today, there is a lot of joy in that. Can be hard, can be tough, but I think there's a lot of joy in that. So I'm not sure that I'd do too much differently, other than I've had the foresight to see COVID coming and have done something before that with regards to the business itself. But
Yeah.
I'm not a mind reader or a fortune teller.
Brilliant. So really, it was from your advice to your 18-year-old self is get on with it. Just carry on
Yeah,
as you are. Yeah, brilliant.
get on with it.
And are there any sort of particular projects you'd like to elaborate on at all at this point?
Yeah, probably with regards to the organic side of it, we've worked fairly closely with the Spa Association and people like that. I don't know whether I should mention it because it's not the greatest example, but the I360, I think is we were supplying them with a number of the not only the sanitizer solutions, but also organic toilet cleaners and things like that. And I think that particularly where we live in Sussex, we have a huge amount of coastline here that is being constantly filled with chemicals and toxins. So the more we can do to change that mentality, I think makes a difference not only to us as individuals, but will make a difference to the next generation as well.
Brilliant. Very wise words. Thank you. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you, Pete?
Well, I'm sure I know you got my details. Or people are more than happy to get in touch with us. I'm more than happy for people to get in touch with me directly. Parasure Organics and Parasure have their own website, so we have an online shop. We will be going on to Amazon fairly shortly as well, actually. But the whole idea really is probably get hold of me, and we'll take it from there. But as I say, we do have an online shop around the organic solutions. But if anybody's interested on the infection control side of it or the sterility assurance side of it, then feel free to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. Pete, thanks a lot for your time. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and absolutely all the best for the future.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks a lot.